There may be true paranormal horror stories. This event still bothers me, even though it happened a long time ago. I stayed the night at my grandparents' house around September of last year. Things looked like they were going pretty normally that night. We ate a delicious steak made by my grandma, watched TV, and then looked through some old pictures. At night, I went to the spare bedroom, which used to be my room when we lived with them. Around 3:15 a.m., I turned on my laptop and put some music on while I got ready for bed so I could fall asleep. Now, let me tell you that there were some strange things that happened there when we lived there, but I wouldn't say any of them were terrible or scary. For example, I've never been a heavy sleeper. Even a quiet step on the wooden stairs outside my room would wake me up. A few times, I woke up to the sound of soft footsteps in the hallway next to my room. When I asked my grandparents later if they were awake, they said no. I even went to check one time, but all the doors were locked and no one was around. Anyway, compared to other rooms, the way my room was set up was a little strange. Before you got to the door, there was a turn in this room that led to a small hallway. That is, you could not see the door from the bed. You could only see the small hallway that led to it. I must have fallen asleep quickly though, because I woke up all of a sudden and couldn't remember how I fell asleep. My body was so tired that it was almost 4 in the morning. This was a little strange because most of the time when I woke up in the middle of the night, I felt pretty awake and fine. That was usually why my body woke me up. I was really tired this time though. Even though I didn't hear anything that woke me up, I knew it wasn't me because I was so tired. With my eyes only half open, I looked in the direction of the short hallway and saw nothing. I closed my eyes and put my head back on the pillow, even though it was dark. Before I heard the awful sound of my bedroom door closing, I lay there in silence for a few minutes. I was almost asleep. I opened my eyes wide and pushed myself off the pillow. I stared into the dark hallway. Before getting out of bed and going to the door, I must have been frozen in place for a minute. I knew something wasn't right, even though there was nothing there. Who opened the door? I always kept it shut. That made me cold, so I quickly shut the door and climbed back into bed. I told myself it had to be one of my grandparents, but I couldn't think of a reason why they would open and close my door. I closed my eyes again and laid still, like I did before, to try to forget about it. Outside the room, loud running steps could be heard going toward the door. The sounds were like heavy, barefoot steps that stopped quickly at the door to the room. I stood there and waited, totally shocked and amazed. I waited for a few long, tense seconds before I heard the door slam shut again. Now I was really scared because I had seen the door close not even a minute before and never heard it open. Even though my heart was beating fast, I was afraid to move. I stayed in bed all night and woke up in the morning. So, as not to scare my grandparents, I hadn't told them. Instead, I made up a reason to leave early and go home. But after a few months, I was staying with a friend and trying to fall asleep while lying on the floor. As I turned away from the door with my eyes closed, I heard it again. This time, the door closed softly. When I turned to see my friend, he was already sound asleep and hadn't heard anything. I asked him about it in the morning, and to my surprise, I haven't heard it since then, not even in my own home. I really don't know what I've been going through, but I have a strong feeling that something supernatural is watching me. Although I still don't get what it means when a door that was already closed shuts again, I would really appreciate it if someone could explain it to me, or even give me a way to get rid of it. Every night I lie in bed scared that I'll wake up to something terrible. Story 2. Last summer, I moved into a small apartment building. It was a cheap 2-bedroom apartment, but it was my only choice because the job I had at the time didn't pay well. It was clear that neither the house nor the room had been well taken care of. A lot of mold had grown in some places, and the whole place looked like it was coming apart. But the lack of other people living there stood out the most from all of these things. When I lived in a couple of apartment buildings before this one, there was almost never a room open. At this place though, almost all of the rooms were still for rent. It was a small building with only 8 rooms. When I was there, that included mine and the rooms of an older couple on the first floor. The middle and top floors were empty because my room was on the 3rd floor. But those floors never really felt empty. Since I lived there for months at a time, I had heard people talking below me more than once. That was the only couple living below me, so I always thought it was just them. I would hear a woman's voice all the time though, never a man's. It was even stranger that I could hear them pretty well, even though they were 2 floors below me. That woman would always sound like she was mumbling to herself. When I woke up, hearing the woman talking to herself below me would sometimes give me the creeps, but I thought she might be sleepwalking, and that the sound might have traveled because the vents in my room were linked to those in theirs. Things got worse over time though. After 2 months, no one else had moved in yet, and I was going up the stairs to my room. As I passed the 2nd floor, I saw that one of the doors to a room was open. As soon as I felt the urge, I took a few steps toward the door to take a look inside. As you'd expect from a room that wasn't being used, it was dark and empty. But as I got closer to the door, I had a really bad feeling, so I went upstairs to my room instead. But that night, when I was taking out the trash, I saw that the door was shut. There was something strange about it that I wasn't sure what to think. I knew no one lived there, so what could it be? That room might have been being worked on by the building owner. That was the only thing that came to mind. So, that night, I went to bed early and had a clear head. But in the middle of the night, I woke up hearing the woman mumbling again below me. Since I had seen the door below me open before, I was more interested in the strange woman this time. I got out of bed slowly so as not to make too much noise. I leaned my ear against the cold floors and listened. Her babbling, which was hard to make out, sounded close but was more of a whisper. If the whisper was coming from the old couple's room on the 1st floor, I knew it couldn't be that close. Seeing this made me nervous at that very moment. I felt like going downstairs to check if the door was open again, but I knew I was too scared to do that. As I thought again in bed, I heard the woman slowly walking around while still talking to herself. It looked like she was walking around the room below me without a plan. But after a few minutes, she stopped all of a sudden. Without a doubt, I was scared. The woman's sudden silence almost made things worse because I had no idea where she was or what she was doing. Fear would grow much stronger that night though. I lay awake in bed for 30 minutes, starting to think that the woman might have quietly left or was just standing there for 30 minutes. I was too scared to sleep either way. I then heard the floor squeak again because someone was walking slowly across it. This time though, it was coming from above me. There were soft creaks in the floor that moved slowly through the upstairs room and stopped right above my bed. There were a few scary seconds of quiet before I heard the woman whispering softly above me. Then she let out a long, painful scream that sounds like it was right in front of my face. The room went quiet again. I held my head up and tried not to cry too much because I was freaking out. I mean, how could I not? Before dawn, I stayed up late making plans with my family to stay with them for a while. I gave them money to get out of my lease and moved in with them while I looked for a new place. I only went back there to load my things into the moving truck once. As I was putting one of the last boxes in the truck, the old couple came out to say goodbye. Since we only said hello and goodbye when we came and went, I had never really talked to them, but they seemed genuinely sad that I was leaving. I don't know if they'd ever been through anything like what I had, but all I could think about during our short talk was how different the old lady's accent was from the woman I heard mumbling. I only thought about how happy I was to be moving out after that. I can only say that I hope I never hear those words from that woman again. Stories 3. This story may be upsetting for some readers because it includes death and other upsetting images. Let's get through this. This family had a lot of problems in the past. Before my family moved in, a lot of people died in the house. There was a time when the people renting it to my mom and stepdad didn't want to live there because their son had chosen to end his life. And before that, the house was the site of a few deaths. It wasn't clear to us, but that's what the owners told us. When my mom met my stepdad, they moved in together soon after. I was young when they met. Things weren't strange for me until my little sister came along. Then, everything went wrong. My little sister, let's call her B, and I had to share a room because the house only had two. When I was younger, I couldn't stand B because she were always crying. But I remember this one night when she cried for hours and then stopped overnight. When I turned around, I saw the dark figure looming over her crib. When it did move, it was slow and light. I was so scared that I hid under my covers until I fell asleep. When I told my parents the next day, they thought I was making it up. There were many more times when I woke up and saw a figure by my sister's crib. Nowhere else in the room, but by the crib all the time. After whining about it for a while, my stepdad slept in my room while I slept with my mom in my parents' room. But there was a lot more going on. My stepdad lost his job not long after I started seeing this figure. Because he worked hard, it shocked my mom a lot when it happened. He was depressed for a long time. He loved his job and must have found it very hard to lose it. I remember that every day he would just sit on the couch and watch TV. When I got home from school one day, I saw him sitting on the couch with a dark figure behind him. Just standing behind the couch, I remember it so well. I started to cry because I didn't know what to do. My stepdad took me to my room to cool me down. I told my mom and dad what I saw when she got home. Once more, my stepdad didn't seem interested, and my mom just looked mad. People didn't believe me. There was silence for a few weeks after that. And then this person started showing up more often, usually with B or my stepdad. I would hear a voice sometimes when I slept in my room. The sound coming from B's crib was that of a woman talking to her. The things that came out of it were always scary, but I never understood them. As B grew up and learned to walk and talk, I saw that she spent a lot of time in that room with her friend. My parents said it was just her imagined friend, so they never seemed to worry about it. I knew what it was, though. The mood in the house got worse as this figure seemed to stay longer. My sister was shy and never talked to anyone. I could feel how angry my mom was, and my stepdad was always sad. I was by myself all the time. When that happened, my parents began yelling at each other all the time. The fact that my stepdad didn't have a job made my mom hate him, and he was a sad mess. It looked like they fought every night, and each time it got worse. I could hear my stepdad telling my mom to put down the knife while I was in my room. That night when I watched TV in the living room was the worst of all. My mom was tired in her room, and my stepdad was asleep on the couch. It wasn't that late, maybe 7:45. I turned off the TV and went up to my room. But when I got to the top of the stairs, I heard whispers and then B talking back to the whispers. I walked over slowly to look inside because the door was slightly open. I could see next to the figure, which looked like it was trying to lead her somewhere. It was only a few steps from the door. When I screamed, the door slammed shut right away. Before my mom ran out of her room, I just stood there crying and yelling. I could barely make out any words, so I just pointed at the door. It was locked when she tried to open it. But since it was a cheap one, she was able to twist it and open the door with her fingernail. B was facing a wall in the corner of the room. That she locked the door when she wasn't even tall enough to reach the knob, my mom yelled at her. B didn't even look like he was responding. After that, I and what seemed like the rest of the family got depressed. No one talked to each other or asked me how I was. It was me and this strange person who took care of my little sister. Once I got to know it, it started to hang out by my bed on nights when I was feeling especially sad. It gave me a strange sense of relief to know that I wasn't alone. My mom finally had enough of my dad, so we went to stay with my grandparents. When she told us to pack up, I saw the figure again by my dad as we walked to the car. It was sad to leave him, but at least he wouldn't be really alone.